Hi, this is Lee Bellinger of the Bellinger Report. I'm the founder and publisher of Off Grid Confidential, which 2 years ago we relaunched our publication, which was then called Independent Living and has become Off Grid Confidential. We are one of the last remaining independent of the internet publications. Off Grid Confidential is, and this is the Bellinger Report, which is on the internet, which is on Off Grid Confidential, www.offgridconfidential.com. I'm Lee Bellinger. I've been in publishing since 1988 and continuously, and I work for Congressman Dan Coates of Indiana as a legislative assistant to the Science and Technology Committee and also to the Science Committee. Anyway, I'm here to talk a little bit today with my colleague and associate, Eric Kramer of Christian Services. And Eric, you might just want to tell us just a little bit about yourself before we jump into the subjects today.
Well, glad to be back again this week. And like Lee said, I'm Eric Kramer. We're working together, and I'm actually the director of Christian Service, a nonprofit in Lancaster, South Carolina. And I do some other things like leadership coaching for Salvation Army pastors. And it's just great to be here today.
Yep, pretty sparky for a pastor. Pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's do you want to be the master of the subjects we're going to discuss today?
Well, yeah, that'd be fine.
Why don't you start throwing it at me? There's a lot to talk about today, as there is every time.
So let's start off with old Chucky Schumer and his backpedaling on Puerto Rico.
Isn't that something? So is that a blink from the other side, or what do you think is going on with that, Eric? You have a very interesting list of conservative people you listen to on the internet, and I'm always enjoying trying to keep up with you on that. And so you noticed, where did you see this? And tell us a little bit about this reversal by Schumer, since we were on the verge of having Puerto Rico turned into the 52nd state after the District of Columbia. So let's talk about that a moment.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where I picked it up, but for those that have know what's going on, a couple weeks back, Chuck Schumer was 100% all in. Did a press conference on it, how Puerto Rico was going to be the next state. He was all supportive of it. And then last week, he came and backpedaled on that and said, no, he was not going to support that in the Senate. And of course, he didn't say why. The speculation around it was that basically what he realized this last Puerto Rico's been trying for years. They go ahead and hold referendums to become, that they vote on as a people. Do they want to become part of the United States? And of course, this last time they did, this last election, said, yes, we want to come in. But actually, what people are speculating is that what he realized is a lot of the Puerto Rican people were for Trump. And they're like, oh,
isn't that a kick in the pulpit?
Yeah, this isn't exactly maybe what we were thinking about. The last thing they want is, to have another state that would be functioning like, say, the Cubans down in South Florida who are for Trump.
That hasn't gone well for them, has it?
No, it hasn't at all. So, but yeah, it's very interesting backpedaling, and it's just really another one of the things that the left are doing. They're really upsetting their base every day. Besides driving us, on the brink of wanting to jump out our second floor windows in our houses, they're driving their own base crazy because they continue to keep backpedaling on things that they thought that they were going to do.
I've got a number of left-wing friends who, and I love to torture them on this thing about the slippage in the Hispanic vote, because the Hispanic vote is, well, let me put it to you this way. I lived in the District of Columbia for 14 years, and Hispanic men were showing up at the construction sites at 4:30 in the morning and getting the lion's share of jobs, and it was making the people of the district furious. And so I've always, and I've noticed that, Hispanics are among the most entrepreneurial classes of people in this country, and they especially with micro businesses. And you know what? You can go to a QT, which is a local chain, I guess. It's like a 7-Eleven chain almost, but you see the working guys there in their uniforms at 5 in the morning. They're there working, going to work, they're getting their coffee, they're getting their sandwiches, they're getting everything for the day. And you see them a lot, and a lot of them like Trump. A lot of them like Trump, and I think Trump increased. There's been a couple of articles. I do don't please don't hold it against me, but I do read the New York Times and the Post every day very carefully, and I look for things like this. And one of the things that's upsetting the left is that they're trying to figure out how in the heck did Trump penetrate the Latino vote by another 7%, cut into that so-called impenetrable market for Republicans, and so Trump really did walk away with a pretty big victory that way. I guess that Chucky Schumer finally got the message that maybe that wouldn't be a bottomless pit of votes for Democrats forever. But I do think I see the District of Columbia moving forward on a statehood issue. But it looks like they're already equivocating on that subject. That they're going to try to. I think you had mentioned to me the other day, Eric, that in the District of Columbia they're looking at some kind of a hybrid plan. Uh, that's usually a sign that they don't have the votes for what they need.
Yeah,
So let's just
yeah,
hope that you know if they don't violate the Puerto Rican firewall and the District of Columbia firewall, I'll consider that to be a big accomplishment for the pro liberty movement. If nothing comes of it, and hopefully the momentum on that dies in Congress. But it looks like it's stillborn at the moment. But you never know.
yeah.
The
Well, hey,
pressure, the political pressure built while Trump was president because he was so polarizing. What we don't know yet is what happens when you have a non-polarizing president. Where does the media? Who do they blame? Where do they go? What do they do? The media they have a 24/7 infrastructure going on, and so for them, blowing up the little things into big things is what they do because they don't always have enough news to cover a 24-hour news cycle. It's a bit of a problem for them without Trump. So I don't know how that's going to play out, or whether that's going to, but that's like the law of unintended consequences.
yeah.
That you just never know. Without Trump, what the hell are they going to talk about next? And how are they going to build their agenda, and what are they going to do? And then all of a sudden they're responsible, and people can actually see them a little more clearly. Um,
Well, since
anyway.
you mentioned the liberty movement, what's your thought on? I know you've been kicking around an idea on a constitutional amendment. What can you like expound on that?
Yes, I think that we're going to see a liberty movement continue to develop. I mean, people are still shell shocked right now by what's happened, and it's understandable. But over time, when people find their footing again, um, we're going to need some pro liberty movement planks where we basically push for something big that we won't get anytime soon, but we should be pushing for it. And I think one of the big things we should do is have a constitutional amendment to prohibit and ban any kind of racial counting in the United States. If we're going to it's the character of our content that matters. It's not. It should be illegal to count people in the census. It should be illegal to take into account what a person's race is. It should not be allowed. It should be absolutely banned. There should be a constitutional amendment banning it in government, and there should be appropriate laws to ban consideration of race of any kind. It's nobody's damn business whether you're white or black or any other race. It's not important. Why? What we want to do is basically put the people who like to do the race counting. We, the Liberty Movement, do not want to count people by their race. We want them to be counted as individuals, as individualists. We should make that point clear and plain and part of our credo going forward as we develop more and more people who want to come and join our freedom movement. And so that's kind of the belief I.
Hmm. That's really interesting. That'd be an interesting amendment. That would be awesome. So kind of looking forward to also along with Liberty Movement, you've also talked about having a Woodstock for conservatives. What is that about? Lee?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm
Yeah.
back.
Oh, you have to go?
So I'm pushing the idea uh, that at some point in the future we should have uh, 1 million pro-liberty Americans congregate out near or at Silicon Valley, maybe some farms in Seattle area, and have a massive rally against big tech's abuse and censorship of the pro liberty movement. There's about 100 million of us out there. Enough to, as I've said before, it's enough to start a country. It's certainly enough to start our own internet. And I think that we should have peaceful, large pro liberty rallies and preferably near or at or around big tech, somewhere close to the big tech Silicon Valley. It could be at farms, it could be a large group, but I think that's something that we should all begin talking about, and eventually, I think what you'll see is all the splinter groups, because remember, they've decapitated our movement for now. And so we're like the weeds, we're going to come right back on up. So they're going to, they have decapitated our movement. So, people are shell shocked, but we're going to need an agenda. And I think a 1 million person gathering, peaceful rally to get the attention of big tech and to get the attention of Congress that. Okay, sorry. Somehow we're having a little technical issue here. Can you hear me, Eric?
Yeah, yeah, you
Okay.
muted. I mean, you went muted for some reason.
Yeah, it muted me for some reason. It's probably my wife did that. It's possible. Um, so I do think that we need to be thinking about this as a movement, and over time it's gonna get there's gonna need to be big rallies again. So that's something I would push, and I think we should be talking about it with lots of other conservative groups as they get together. But they big tech made a big mistake when everybody when they decapitated everybody having conversations about Joe Biden's influence peddling scandal, 2 weeks up to the election. And then after the election, 100 million people told they can't even discuss the election on their online platforms. And then when millions of people basically when they went to Parlor, they got they machine gunned the lifeboat in mid ocean, and that got everybody's attention. And I think that's something that it's a good thing because people now know that big tech is bad news. I I took Off Grid Confidential and created Off Grid Confidential for this very contingency because uh, we saw that free speech was going away on the internet, and so we endeavored to create the first publication that delivers its public newsletters independent of the internet. And so that's where we're at. So
Hmm.
you still there with me?
Yeah, yeah, I'm still
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Anyway,
Um, I mean, have you heard me cough at all?
no.
Okay. All right, cool. That's good. I've been muting myself on that. I wanted to make sure that somehow I wasn't coughing because
No, you're doing good. You sound fine, actually.
I have my COVID cough because I
You
had
had your
co-
COVID cough.
yeah, well I've got because I had COVID about 6 weeks ago. So
Well,
I've
you
got
made
this
you
lingering cough
you
from it.
actually made more sense when you were sick. So I don't know what happened. Maybe
Well,
maybe
that does happen at times.
yeah. So
Speaking of things that you were talking to me the other day about the lost history of the Korean merchants.
yes, that's it's an important story that's been forgotten. But in 1992, when the Rodney King riots happened in L.A., this was a scenario where it was kind of the police and all the people that were law abiding, who had listened to the police, listened to local government, had surrendered their guns and were helpless. We're going to come take care of you. And then when the riots started, the police basically just backed out of the city and left all the merchants and all the people that had surrendered their guns to the tender mercies of these of these crowds that were literally going and hunting down people because they were Asian or they were white. And, um, one of the things that happened was this was like fairly early in the days, when the internet was very, very new, and frankly, you could see, in the helicopters that they were hunting people, pulling them out of their cars and bashing their heads in, and it was happening across the city. And all because the people had given up their guns to the local government. They just said, "Oh, yeah, we're going to obey the law," and and so then they got thrown under the bus by the Los Angeles police and the government itself. They totally got thrown under the bus. But there was a notable exception. So the Korean merchants in major parts of Los Angeles had worked together, and they had an emergency plan for this contingency, and this included stationing snipers up on the roofs of all the buildings, and they set up defensive perimeters. And they did not ever have to shoot or hurt anybody, but all the crowds went around them. They did not come near them. It was peaceful. It was what I call porcupine resistance, meaning that they weren't going out and looking for trouble. They merely were there like a porcupine. If you're going to stick your finger down in the hole, you're going to find the porcupine, and it's not what you want. And so it was a defensive hedgehog, a defensive posture, a porcupine posture, where it was a passive defense unless you cross the line, and then you risk getting shot at. And these Korean merchants, they didn't. Nobody got hurt. They didn't get their heads bashed in. They didn't have their shops looted and destroyed, and their families were all safe. And it was the dumb white people in the city who just basically gave up all their rights and got the crap kicked out of them. And they got blamed for it too because they were racist. I mean, it's just nuts. But the Korean merchants, and I think there's a lesson in that, because one thing we want to do is we want to be a peaceful movement, because that's, seizing the high ground is what you want. And also, protecting and creating self-security is what you want. It's also a similar arrangement has happened in South Africa, where there's genocidal minded people in the majority who don't like the commercial farmers, and they've set up private militias, and basically that country's at a standstill. The private militias are holding off dangerous elements of society that want to hurt them. And so the oppressed white minority, are actually holding their own, and they're not having to hurt anybody. And they're less of a target for the genocidal elements in the South African government that have taken over since Mandela passed away. So, the peaceful, it's a standoff, and in that country, lots of people are let's just say that the people have set up an effective defensive posture in a country that's in a much worse condition than we are here. And so, I think that there's some lessons in all of that to think about in how we associate with each other. And it doesn't really matter who's black and who's white, because there's a lot of pro-liberty Americans who are black and who are Hispanic who want to be part of our movement as well. And I think those numbers are going to continue to grow. And we need all the help we can get. So that's okay. And I'm glad to see that. And that type, at the Korean merchants are heroes. They were heroes of their day, and they've long since been forgotten. People should pay more attention to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting. So hey, so what do you think about the Supreme Court just kind of dropping the ball and on us again? Basically, there's only, from what I understand, there's one, maybe only two cases left from the election that they have not, actually rule on if they're going to hear yet. But it seems like um, there's no help out of them. What do-
Well, the thing is, the problem is that we, the Republicans, dropped the ball in so many ways and allowed so many bad precedents to get set. Yes, the state legislatures, they have, the Constitution gives them authority to act, and to set, campaign laws and election rules and everything else. But if you don't use that authority, you lose that authority. So, they didn't enforce it. They didn't do the things they needed to do, even in Republican states. And so I think you're going to see more ballot security in the Republican states. And obviously, HR 1 is an attempt at diluting votes and forcing a federal solution on states, um, that Pelosi is pushing. But I think they're going to have problems with it because, in the end, the Constitution really does is very clear about the supremacy of state legislatures in this. And since the Republicans hold a commanding lead in that regard on the state level, that I'm hopeful that that's not going to get too far. That, but the Supreme Court, yes, they're very disappointing. Uh, you know, uh, Clarence Thomas does basically chastised the court for shirking their responsibilities. It's and that's sad to see. But
Yeah, actually, I think we should, you know how the left wants to pack the court. I think we should shrink the court to just one, and I think Clarence Thomas would be a good representative.
yeah, Clarence Thomas, that's right.
I think we
So
should go the other way and just
yeah,
shrink the court to one. They
shrink the
can try
court to
to,
one.
yeah, shrink it to one, and my vote's for Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas, yeah,
Yeah,
he's certainly the most reliable. And
yeah.
remember the baptism of fire he endured to get in there. Remember? Are you old enough to remember that?
No, well,
Oh,
I'm
okay,
pretty old
that's what I
enough.
thought.
I don't
That's what I
remember.
thought.
It's a
Okay.
matter if you're paying attention to
Yeah,
things.
you weren't paying attention. That was a really a
That's
hell of a
called not paying attention.
that was a hell of a thing.
Yeah, I'm actually like I think a year older than you. I'm 62.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't mention all that, but
Yeah.
okay.
Well, there you go. Well, you had to pick up. You had to point it out. So
Yeah, I did. It was my fault.
I'm
So,
very transparent. So my age doesn't bother me. So,
okay. Well,
but
deep down, I'm shallow.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, the Supreme Court, it really let us down. But it was interesting. I was actually listening to something, and Sidney Powell's still out there, and
Oh
her
yeah.
response to all of that was, "It ain't over yet." She said, "Don't give up. There's still things in the works. I don't know what they are, but um, you know." She said they are still pushing forward, and there's still things in the works. So we can always. Um, I don't think there's ever going to be anything that's going to turn around, the past election. We're going to have to move forward, but we definitely got to get things in place to make sure that the next election, in 2022 and beyond that, is going to be, um, you know, uh, a fair and legal election. Um, and that's where I know you said it all the time, Lee. We've got to start getting involved locally. I'm proud to say that we're here in South Carolina, and for those of you that might not live in a state like South Carolina, you might want to consider moving here. Our General Assembly here has they're calling it the pushback agenda. For those of you who don't know, last week our governor signed the heartbeat bill as far as abortion. That once there's a heartbeat determined for a child, that only abortions that will be illegal past that point are if you have rape, incest, or if the mother is her health or her life is being threatened. Other than that, you know, abortion will not be allowed in South Carolina. Of course, there's several other states doing that too, but and of course, what the what the left doesn't want is they're concerned they don't want that to actually end up at the door to Supreme Court because then you could risk, the overturning of Roe Wade, which would be very interesting. But you got to get involved with your state. This pushback agenda in South Carolina, just a few of the bills, but our assembly is really they've got many bills that they're looking at right now. Ones that are going to put they're going to ignore they're going to put fiscal restraints on the Fed. They're going to that there's ones pushing for that we're going to ignore illegal White House executive orders. Um, we're going to reject lawless federal government actions. We're going to limit effects to enact gun control. South Carolina is looking at possibly going open carry and also, constitutional carry, which means no permits. We've got a social media bill that they're looking forward to putting forward to where that the social media companies cannot, shut down speech that they've been doing. There's a peaceful protest where we're saying that, hey, you can have peaceful protests, but mob violence will not be allowed in South Carolina. So, and the list is even much longer than that. So, get on your representatives, get on your governors, and like Lee was saying, we've got control of a lot of the state, the state legislature, state governorships, and at the end of the day, the federal government can't do anything without the collaboration of the states. If the states throw up their hands and say we're not doing this, there's nothing they can really do.
And not to mention the fact that if they're well, they ran out of money a long time ago, but if they run into a debt crisis, meaning a debt funding crisis, they're going to have like no leverage because people are already, I think that you're going to see a lot more people turning to their state governments for solutions and to resolve and get involved in these types of issues. And if they have a financial crisis, they're going to have like no hold left. They're going to be essentially powerless. It could happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen. They'll definitely want to steal your 401ks before they're going to take down all the money. But at the rate that they're printing fake money now, you're already seeing inflation here in South Carolina. Here in Rock Hill, it's the lowest gas prices typically in the United States, and I'm seeing them creep up already. So, this is going to become a big liability, and the food is definitely going up because food is very energy price sensitive. So and also you're seeing the base metals going up significantly all over. Some from copper, I think, is up 17% in the last year, and those are the early warning signs that inflation is getting a foothold because they're creating so much money. So that's something to really pay attention to. And the food is going to go up, and people are going to start noticing that their gasoline prices are much, much higher. And we have to keep pressing those issues. We have to press them very, very hard. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you saw, Lee, like, last week they were estimating that inflation, that the prediction was to come in at 0.2 percent,
yeah,
and it came in at 1.7. So the interesting thing on that, if we would go back and measure inflation the way we used to measure inflation, that's really more of a 9% rate. So yeah,
absolutely.
we are really experiencing an uptick in prices, and you can't go by the inflation index because they keep that depressed.
They keep that depressed so they don't have to up the social security numbers too much, and number among other things.
Right.
And then that's their other little trick is that the social security will never run out of money, but what will happen is the dollar value of those monies are going to get they're going to have less and less and less purchasing power, and it's going to be essentially meaningless. So I still think people should invest in private ownership of gold and silver if you can. The way you do that is you can begin to develop relationships with local coin dealers. They're all over the place in these little strip malls, in little marginal strip malls. That's where they tend to be, and going in and buying them and developing a relationship with them. If you do that on a consistent basis, you'll be able to sell and buy your metals, privately without anybody noticing it. So it's becoming fluent in the underground economy. I'm developing right now as we speak an encyclopedia for dealing with the for coping with the underground economy and where pro-liberty Americans can take steps so that they're less vulnerable to financial deplatforming. I don't know if you I have written about this many times in Off Grid Confidential, and like last year, the Bank of America, they're a bunch of corporate socialist fascists, and they came up with a new service agreement, so-called service agreement. And I looked at the fine print, and sure enough, they've added some. What they've done is they've added language that basically lays the groundwork to a discontinued service to anybody that espouses what they regard as controversial ideas, whatever that means. So and then of course in the Capitol Hill riots, Bank of America, sure enough, yet another thing they did was they provided all the detailed information. They did a scan of all of their depositors and their bank account holders and determined which of them were in the Capitol, and they determined which of them were staying in hotels, and they determined which of them had gas bills, fuel bills for their cars, and so forth. And they provided the data on their customers over to the federal government so that they could be targeted for just peaceful assembly at the rally there up in DC on January 6th. So so the deplatforming potential is going to get enormous. There's a lot more information. There's a lot more. The left is being much more open about it, and I think we're going to see more and more of it. So becoming understanding how the private economy, the underground economy works, is very, very important. I hope people watch some of my articles in the coming editions of Off Grid Confidential, because knowing how to navigate if the ATMs go out, or if you get deplatformed and you can't buy food, or whatever the issue is, because your bank is freezing your money. These are all defenses that you're going to need, and physical precious metals is certainly one of the things you got to take into to consider. And you can start by just going to your local strip mall with a coin shop and start talking to them. Don't go to pawn shops. Don't go to these meltdown companies that melt down cosmetic jewelry for little pieces of metal. But you can go to actual real coin shops, and those are good places to start. So anyway, uh, it's just something to do to protect yourself in the inflationary environment we're looking at. And also, I mean, this thing about the energy, um, about throwing out the window our hard-won energy independence. Uh, everything in this country is made with energy, and especially food. So food takes energy, lots of it. So as fuel prices go up and up and up, it's going to drive the prices of food up, and a lot of other corollary things, and it's all going to be very hidden. And the middle class, working class families, it isn't just going to be a matter of their gasoline is going to be $100 to fill their tank again soon. I predict about $1 gallon gain nationally on average between now and this time next year at this point. So, but it's going to go up. And of course, that's what the left want. And maybe they'll try to restrain it a little bit before, in advance of the 2022 election. But it is something to watch very carefully and to agitate about and talk to people about. So,
Well, I'm surprised you're worried about that with the new Green Deal. I mean, because you know,
well, it worked well
look
in
how
Texas, didn't it?
well, look how successful the Green Deal's been in Texas. I don't know if
I,
you saw. Of course, most people understand that the windmills froze, but Texas had has its own power grid, and they had to get power from the national grid. I was just reading one of the people down there. Fortunately, this person had enough in his. I actually, let me take that back. Unfortunately, this person had enough money in their checking account. Their power bill for the week that they all endured down there, where they were basically with 1 and 2 degree temperatures, was $17,000. I was the same article that I was reading. They're saying the average Texan down there will have a $5,000 power bill, because what happened was the Texas grid was kilowatts per hour was 8 to 10 cents. By getting the having to Texas having to borrow the electricity from the grid, the main grid or the federal grid, whatever it is, they're having to pay $900 a kilowatt hour. They said it's going to devastate most families. They're going to owe $5,000 on average. So yeah, it's called the New Green Deal.
yeah, well, and hey, the Paris Accords too. We got that
Yeah.
going for us, and of course, United Nations Project 21. So all these crazies. That's their blueprint for energy rationing going forward in the United States, because of compliance with the Paris Accords, and that's a very clever way of doing it. By the way, they sign they don't even do a treaty that gets approved by the Senate. They just make an executive agreement with foreign countries, and then they use that to put in the smart meters so that they can micromanage people's use of home power and all this. The smart meters are coming back, and they kind of had they were on hiatus while President Trump was in power, but they're coming back again, and we're going to be looking at home power rationing because to manage rolling blackouts and the whole 9 yards, it's all starting all over again. And there was an important Wall Street Journal article this morning about the coming power shortages in the various states, and we do have a publication called the Rolling Blackout Survival Guide. And if you want to call our number, we offer it free. It's 877-371-1807. And it's just talk to, we have very friendly, nice operators. And just tell them you're interested in that particular report, and tell them I told you to call. So anyway, just the rolling blackout survival guide, and all that is a very important piece of work for people to know about if you want to go deeper into the subject. So
Like,
that's
I know we're getting
that's
close to the end
crazy.
of our time, but we had one more thing that you wanted
You're
to,
like Columbo. One more
yeah,
thing, just like
one more
Columbo.
thing, yeah. But you did say
Are
something
you old
about,
enough to remember Columbo?
oh yeah, yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah,
Just
um,
checking.
yeah, definitely no Columbo.
You're older than me.
I'm older than you,
Yeah,
but just,
I just wanted to. It
but
makes
you're
me.
right,
It
but you're
gives me
right
a.
behind me.
It gives me emotional security to say that you're older than me. Okay,
Yeah, well, that's good.
just roll with it, Eric. Roll with it.
Yeah. Um, Last thing, I know you had a comment. I'm kind of interested to hear what it is. You wanted to mention something about Martin Luther King. And then we can continue with
Absolutely.
that.
What's really funny about that is, like, when I was a very young man and I was there in Dan Coates' office, and I remember the Martin Luther King holiday passing, and at the time I thought it was a really bad idea. And because I went to Hillsdale College, and I was aware that Martin Luther King had hardline leftist views, and a lot of people thought he was a communist, and of course, the FBI didn't like him, and J. Edgar Hoover didn't like him very much. But what's interesting about it over time, I've come to appreciate the fact that uh, actually the left have completely abandoned Martin Luther King. The constitutional amendment against racial counting is something that hits the content of the character of the person instead of their skin color. And I suggest we embrace Dr. King's model. We, as pro-liberty Americans, by God, it turns out that the left was correct for a change back then. The guy deserves a holiday. I mean, I think we the pro liberty movement should embrace the ideals that he was talking about, which includes peaceful rallies that win people over. And that's what we want to do. We want to have rallies where people clean up, where we also provide security so that so that the leftists can't raid our rallies and try to make us look like we did something wrong. And so we need security. We need a better way of doing these rallies, and that's why I believe in the Woodstock approach. I think that we need to go out and not yet, because like I said, our movement has been decapitated. It's understandable while people settle and new leaders come up, but we have 100 million people who have been disenfranchised, and that is one hell of a large market for a hell of a lot of people. And there's going to be a lot of invention and a lot of ambitious people who are going to want a piece of that 100 million pro-liberty market that have been disenfranchised in this country, who are the actual majority in this country. We're the majority. We should start acting like it. And we don't have to go in and abuse people and be jerks. We can win with the power of our example, our peaceful rallies, and our insistence on calling out the other side, and really just working from the ground up in the state level and all that for more permanent victories. But we need our own internet. Um, we need a place to organize, and eventually, until the system cracks, because that's the system we need to crack. And I think they can be beaten. I do believe the left can be beaten. I'm going to be writing more stories about over time how I think the left can be defeated. But we have to take control of the narrative. I mean, President Trump did a great job of showing that you can stand up and create an alternate narrative to the left. As far as I can see, he's the first Republican president to do that actively. Um, Reagan did it to some degree. Reagan had a narrative, but he was a very inactive man compared to President Trump was. President Trump was just more active in that area, but we have to develop our own narrative as well. And Martin Luther King, you know what? The left dropped the ball on that. I say we pick it up and run with Martin Luther King, because if you look at the principles that this guy did, they totally fit. You know, we're a liberty movement, and the bad guys are in power and they're in control. And what we want to do is we want to be the uppity people. We want to be the uppity people, the pro liberty people. Coca-Cola, they want to bash us because what? Because we're white. Well, there's a lot of Black Americans that agree with us. There's a lot of Hispanic Americans who agree with us, and we should be much more about that. We should build on what President Trump established, which is that we can gain Black votes, and we can gain Hispanic votes, and we can gain Asian votes, and we can gain every race in this country. There's a lot of people that share our values, and that's what we want to do. So I think there's a lot to study and learn from there. I have to say, with Martin Luther King, I did change my mind over a long period of time, but I reserve the right to be smarter today than I was yesterday. That's what I believe. And we just have to go back to school. It's starting from the bottom up, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you just have to start from the bottom up. Uh, we thought we had it with Trump. We didn't, and but they took him out. And the Off-Grid Confidential had been predicting that his survival was a 50-50 shot, and he actually got a little further than I thought he would. And who knows, he might come back. But the liberty movement is more important than any one man, any one person. So, but he certainly, he might have been a dark knight, a slightly flawed fellow, but uh, you know, sometimes liberty movements coalesce around people you wouldn't expect. I would never have thought that Donald Trump would have been a symbol for, or the leader of a liberty movement, any more than Martin Luther King, but sometimes it just happens that way. So the law of unintended consequences, my friend. That's the one thing that saves our ass every time.
Well, speaking of Trump, maybe next week we'll have something to talk about from his CPAC.
Oh,
Convention.
yes, indeed. I'm sure he's going to have a few things to say. And I liked his office of the former president. It looks a lot like what Biden did when he came in. I thought that was pretty funny. The office of the president-elect, and Trump's got a similar thing going on now. So, um, you know, who knows? Probably, my guess is Barron Trump will end up being president if you live long enough at your age. We'll see Barron Trump as president maybe someday. I wouldn't be shocked. One of the Trump kids.
Yeah.
Eric needs to lose the beard because it makes him look sinister. But I mean, frankly, I think Barron might be it. Barron might be it. He only has 15 years to go, right? 16, 18 years to go, and he could be
Yeah.
president.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, you have to be 35, I think, is he
35 to be president.
Yeah. So he's probably got more like
he's 15, so
he's got 20 years. So
so he'll be ready.
I guess this will conclude this week's Lee, and we'll have to see what happens over the weekend and see what we've got for next week.
So this is another fun edition of the Bellinger Report. We have some other things cooking for next week, and I'm going to want to talk to you about all the crazies you're listening to online, because you have a pretty good list of them, and I always enjoy catching up. I'm learning a lot about some of these right-wing cranks that have awesome little shows going on. So, and
all right. Well,
thank you.
Until next week.
Until next week, Eric.
Adios.
Adios.